The last thing I remember was the sound of screeching tires and shattering glass. Then nothing. A deep, empty blackness. I woke up in a hospital room that smelled like bleach and despair. My body was a map of pain, wrapped in bandages and pinned together with metal. A doctor with tired eyes told me I was lucky to be alive. The car accident had totaled my sedan and my spine. "You may not walk again, Mark," he said, his voice gentle but final. My wife Sarah was there. Her hand felt cold in mine. Her beautiful blue eyes were red and puffy from crying. "We'll get through this, Mark," she whispered, but her voice sounded thin, stretched tight with a fear I couldn't quite place at the time. I clung to her words like a lifeline. She was my rock. We had been married for 8 years, high school sweethearts. I thought our love was unbreakable. The days blurred together in a haze of pain medication and physical therapy. The first time they tried to get me to sit up, the world spun and I vomited from the agony. Sarah would visit after her work, but her stays grew shorter. She'd stare at her phone, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the screen. She talked about bills piling up, about how my disability insurance was a joke. I was too drugged and too broken to really hear the warning in her voice. I just saw my wife and I believed her when she said we were a team. 3 months after the accident, I was transferred to a rehabilitation center. It was a place of grim determination and the constant smell of antiseptic. My world had shrunk to the 4 walls of my room and the parallel bars of the therapy gym. Sarah drove me there in a silence that was heavier than any of the weights I was trying to lift. She helped me into the wheelchair the center provided and wheeled me to my new temporary room. She unpacked my bag with quick, efficient movements, not looking at me. "Sarah?" I said, my voice still weak. "Is everything okay?" She stopped, her back to me. She took a deep breath, and when she turned around, her face was a mask I didn't recognize. It was cold and resolved. "Mark, I can't do this," she said, her words like ice chips. "Do what?" I asked, genuinely confused. "The therapy? I know it's hard, but no. All of this." She gestured at me, at the wheelchair, at the whole situation. "The bills are crushing us. You're not the man I married. This isn't the life I signed up for." I felt the air leave my lungs. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm leaving, Mark. I filed for divorce. My lawyer will be in touch." She dropped the room key on the bedside table. And just like that, she walked out of the room and out of my life. I was alone, trapped in a broken body, and my heart felt just as shattered. The first night alone in the rehab center was the longest of my life. The darkness pressed in on me, and the pain in my body was nothing compared to the hollow ache in my chest. Sarah was gone. The future we had planned, the kids, the house by the lake, was gone. All that was left was this wheelchair and a mountain of despair. I didn't want to get up the next morning. I didn't want to eat. I just wanted to disappear. But my physical therapist, a relentlessly cheerful woman named Anna, wouldn't allow it. She burst into my room at 7 a.m. "Up and at him, Mark. We've got work to do." "Go away," I mumbled into my pillow. "Nope," she said, pulling the curtains open. "The world didn't end. You're still in it. And you have 2 legs that, with a lot of work, are going to carry you again. Now, are you going to feel sorry for yourself or are you going to fight?" Her words were like a slap. I looked at her, ready to yell, but I saw something in her eyes. It wasn't pity. It was a challenge. She believed I could fight. And in that moment, a tiny, stubborn spark ignited inside me. Sarah thought I was broken beyond repair. I decided right then that I would prove her wrong. Not for her, but for me. Therapy became my new job. It was agony. Every movement was a battle. Anna was a merciless drill sergeant, pushing me past what I thought were my limits. "Pain is just weakness leaving the body, Mark," she'd say as I strained to lift my leg for the 100th time. I hated her during those sessions. But I also started to respect her. She saw potential where I only saw failure. Between sessions, I was alone with my thoughts. The anger at Sarah began to burn away the self-pity. How could she just leave? In sickness and in health, we had vowed. To distract myself, I started reading on my old tablet. I'd always been good with numbers, so I began reading about investing, about the stock market. It was a complex puzzle, and losing myself in it was better than thinking about my empty life. A guy in the room next to mine, an older man named Ben who was recovering from a knee replacement, saw me reading. "Thinking of becoming the next Wolf of Wall Street from a rehab center?" he joked. I managed a weak smile. "Something like that. Just trying to keep my mind busy." "Smart man," he said. "The body heals faster when the mind is occupied." It was the first real conversation I'd had in weeks. Felt good. Months passed. The seasons changed outside my window, but inside, my world was measured in small, hard-won victories. The day I took my first step without the parallel bars, clutching Anna's arms, I cried. They were tears of pure, exhausted joy. I was going to walk again. My financial situation was dire. The divorce papers had arrived, and Sarah was taking half of what little we had. My meager savings were evaporating fast. The fear was a constant companion. But my studying was paying off. I had used a small amount of money from a forgotten savings account to start trading. It was terrifying, but I was careful. I started with tiny, safe bets. I discovered I had a knack for it. I could see patterns in the chaos of the market. I began making small, consistent profits. It wasn't enough to live on, but it was hope. It was proof that my mind still worked, that I could still provide for myself, even from a hospital bed. Ben became my sounding board. I'd explain my theories to him and he'd listen, asking sharp questions. He was a retired accountant, and his experience was invaluable. A year after the accident, I walked out of the rehab center on my own 2 feet, using a cane for support. The sun on my face felt like a miracle. I was going to a small, rented apartment, a far cry from the home I'd shared with Sarah. I had nothing but a suitcase of clothes and my laptop. But I also had a fire in my belly. The small profits from my trading had grown. I had a system now, a disciplined approach that focused on long-term growth and calculated risks. I spent my days in physical therapy at a local clinic and my nights analyzing charts and financial reports. I was a ghost in the real world, but online I was becoming someone. I started a blog anonymously, detailing my investment strategies and the lessons I'd learned from my catastrophic personal loss. I called it The Phoenix Portfolio. To my surprise, it started to get followers. People were drawn to the story of rebuilding from ruin. I never mentioned the accident or Sarah, only the philosophy of rising from the ashes. 2 years to the day after Sarah left me in that rehab center, I was no longer just surviving. I was thriving. The Phoenix Portfolio blog had attracted a large audience. A publisher reached out, offering me a book deal. The advance was more money than I'd ever seen in my life. My trading account had grown exponentially. The small, careful bets had compounded into real wealth. I was debt-free and for the first time financially secure. Physically, I was stronger than I'd been before the accident. The daily discipline of recovery had transformed my body. I no longer needed the cane. I ran 5 miles every morning, the pounding of my feet on the pavement a rhythm of freedom and strength. I bought a modern, airy apartment with a view of the city. It was mine. Every piece of furniture, every painting on the wall, was a choice I made for myself. There were no ghosts of a failed marriage here. I was happy. Truly, deeply happy in a way I never was with Sarah. I had built a life I loved from the wreckage she abandoned. My book, Rising from the Ashes, was published. It became a surprise bestseller. The story of overcoming adversity through discipline and smart financial planning resonated with people. I was asked to give talks. I kept my anonymity, using a pseudonym and never showing my face. I liked the mystery. It kept me separate from the fame. One afternoon, I was meeting my literary agent for coffee at a high-end hotel. As I walked through the elegant lobby, confident in a well-tailored suit, I saw her. Sarah. She was sitting in the lounge, waiting for someone. She looked older. The stress of the life she'd chosen without me was etched in fine lines around her eyes. She was dressed nicely, but it lacked the easy elegance she'd once had. Our eyes met across the room. Hers widened in shock. She was looking at a man she didn't recognize. I was taller, stronger, my posture confident. The broken man in the wheelchair was gone. I saw her gaze travel over my suit, my watch, the easy way I carried myself. I felt a calm I never expected. There was no anger, just a quiet pity. I gave her a small, polite nod, the kind you'd give a stranger, and walked on to meet my agent. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. A few days later, I got an email. It was from Sarah. The subject line was simply, "Hello." My heart didn't even skip a beat. I felt curiously detached. I opened it. She wrote that it was good to see me looking so well. She said she'd heard about my book and was incredibly proud of me. She asked if I would like to meet for coffee to catch up. She said she often thought about me and wondered how I was doing. I read the email twice. There was no apology. No acknowledgement of the pain she had caused. It was as if she had simply taken a long vacation and was now checking in. The audacity was stunning. I didn't reply. I deleted the email and went for my run. The past was a country I had no desire to revisit. But she was persistent. Another email came a week later. Then a friend request on social media. She was circling, curious about the new man I had become. The man her abandonment had forced me to become. I ignored it all. I had nothing to say to her. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of irony. I was invited to speak at a major financial conference in the city. It was my first public appearance. I decided it was time to step out from behind the pseudonym. I was proud of my story and no longer afraid to claim it. The day of the conference, the hall was packed. I stood backstage taking deep breaths. I could see the audience through the curtain. And there in the third row was Sarah. She must have seen the announcement. She was staring at the stage, her program clutched in her hands. I walked on stage to enthusiastic applause. I told my story. I didn't use names, but I talked about the accident, the betrayal, the dark days in rehab, and the long climb back. I talked about the power of resilience and the strategy behind the Phoenix portfolio. I spoke for 40 minutes and you could have heard a pin drop. When I finished, the applause was thunderous. As I left the stage, people swarmed me, shaking my hand, asking for autographs. And then, she was there, right in front of me. "Mark," she said, her voice trembling. "That was amazing." I looked at her. "Thank you, Sarah," I said, my voice calm and polite. "Can we talk?" she asked, her eyes pleading. "Please?" I agreed to talk, but on my terms. I led her to a quiet corner of the conference center, away from the crowd. She looked nervous, twisting her hands together. "You look incredible, Mark," she started. "I feel good," I said simply. "I read your book. I had no idea you were going through all that. The pain, the struggle." "You knew about the pain, Sarah," I said, my voice still even. "You were there when the doctor told me I might not walk. You were the one who told me you couldn't handle it." She flinched. "I was scared. I was young. I didn't know what to do. Leaving me was a choice," I said. "A very clear one. You didn't just leave a sick man. You left me when I needed you most. You filed for divorce from a hospital bed." Tears welled in her eyes. "I know. I've regretted it every single day. I was a fool, Mark. I see that now. Look at what you've become. You're this superstar." I finally understood. She wasn't here to apologize for hurting me. She was here because she saw my success and wanted a piece of it. The realization was like a bucket of cold water. It washed away any last, lingering sentiment I might have held. "What is it you want, Sarah?" I asked, cutting through her tears. She looked up, surprised by my directness. I want another chance. I never stopped loving you, Mark. I made a terrible mistake. Seeing you today, hearing your story, it made me realize what we lost." I almost laughed. "Almost. We lost nothing, Sarah. You threw it away. What you're seeing now isn't us. It's me. It's what I built after you left. But don't you think we could build something new? Something better?" she pleaded. "No," I said, my voice firm but not unkind. "I don't. The man you loved was dependent on you. He needed you. This man," I said, gesturing to myself, "doesn't need anyone. I respect myself too much to go back to someone who valued me so little." Her face crumpled. The truth was a weapon she wasn't prepared for. She had expected a vulnerable man she could manipulate, not a fortress of self-worth. "So that's it," she whispered. "That's it," I said. I stood up. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Sarah. But it's not with me." I turned and walked away, and I didn't look back. This time I was the one walking out, whole and complete. Walking away from Sarah felt like the final step in my recovery. It was the moment I truly closed the door on the past. A weight I didn't even know I was carrying lifted from my shoulders. I was free. My public appearance launched my career into the stratosphere. I started a successful investment firm, Phoenix Wealth Management, based on the principles from my book. I hired a team of brilliant, driven people. We helped others, people who felt broken by life or finances, to rebuild. I thought about Sarah sometimes, but without bitterness. In a strange way, I was grateful to her. Her abandonment was the crucible that forged me. Without that pain, I would have remained the comfortable, complacent man I was before. I never would have discovered my own strength. Life was full. I had friends like Ben from the rehab center who I still had lunch with every week. I had my work, which I loved. I had my health. I was dating, casually, enjoying the company of women who were attracted to the man I was now, not who they wanted me to be. About a year after the conference, I was featured on the cover of a major business magazine. The headline read, "From Wheelchair to Wall Street, the Mark Jennings Story." It felt surreal. My phone buzzed constantly with congratulations. One message stood out. It was from Sarah's mother, Helen. We had always been close. The message was simple. "I saw the magazine, Mark. I am so proud of the man you've become. And I am so sorry for what my daughter did. You deserved so much better. I felt a pang of sadness for Helen. I knew Sarah's departure had hurt her too. I wrote back a warm, gracious reply, thanking her for her kind words and assuring her I held no ill will. I meant it. It was the last loose thread from my old life, neatly tied. I had made peace with every part of my journey. The accident, the betrayal, the struggle, they were all chapters in the story that led me to this moment of contentment and purpose. I had not just recovered, I had evolved. I decided to use my wealth and influence for something more. I started a foundation to support people with spinal cord injuries, providing them with funding for advanced therapies and equipment that insurance wouldn't cover. I named it after my physical therapist, Anna. She cried when I told her. At the foundation's launch gala, I was the guest of honor. I stood at the podium looking out at a room full of donors, doctors, and survivors. I told my story again, but this time I focused on hope. I talked about the importance of having someone like Anna, who refuses to let you give up on yourself. After my speech, a young man in a wheelchair approached me, his eyes full of a familiar fire. Your story, it gives me hope, he said. They told me I'll never walk again. I knelt down so we were eye level. They told me that too, I said. Don't listen to the prognosis. Listen to your own spirit. Fight for every inch. And remember, your value isn't in your ability to walk. It's in here, I said, tapping my chest. And in here, I said, tapping my head. In that moment, my life felt like it had come full, perfect circle. Life has a funny way of balancing itself out. I was at a charity auction for my foundation when I saw a woman struggling to hold her purse and a glass of champagne while trying to bid on a vacation package. I reached over and held her glass for her. Thank you, she said with a warm laugh. I'm all thumbs tonight. Her name was Chloe. She was a graphic designer and she was there with a friend who was a donor. We talked all night. She was smart, funny, and kind. She didn't know who I was and she didn't care. She was interested in me, not my story or my money. We started dating. It was easy and light. She had her own life, her own passions. She didn't need me to complete her. She wanted me to complement her. It was a healthy, equal partnership, something I had never experienced with Sarah. With Sarah, I was always trying to prove my worth. With Chloe, I was just enough as I was. I never hid my past from Chloe. One evening, over dinner, I told her the whole story, the accident, Sarah leaving, the long recovery. She listened quietly, her hand resting on mine. When I finished, she didn't look at me with pity. She looked at me with awe. What you went through, it's horrible, she said. But my God, Mark, the strength it must have taken. You built a beautiful life out of rubble. That's incredible. Her words healed a wound I didn't know was still there. She saw my scars not as flaws but as evidence of my resilience. She loved the man I was now, and she respected the journey that had created him. It was the greatest gift anyone had ever given me. I realized then that Sarah's departure was the best thing that could have happened to me. It cleared the path for someone who truly deserved to be in my life. It made room for a real, unconditional love. 2 years after I walked out of the rehab center, I was on a hiking trip in the mountains with Chloe. The air was crisp and clean. We reached a summit and looked out over a breathtaking valley. I felt a profound sense of peace. I was healthier, stronger, and wealthier than I had ever been. I turned to Chloe. You know, this is the life I always wanted, I said. But I never knew it until I lost the one I had. She smiled. Sometimes you have to get lost to find your way. I took her hand. I think I've found my way, I said. And I knew with every fiber of my being that it was true. The accident had broken my body. Sarah had broken my heart. But from those broken pieces, I had built something unbreakable. I had built a life of purpose, joy, and genuine love. I proposed to Chloe on that mountain. She said yes. We planned a small, intimate wedding. I didn't invite anyone from my old life, except for Ben and Anna. They were my family now. The wedding was perfect, simple and filled with joy. As I stood at the altar watching Chloe walk toward me, I felt no shadows from the past. There was no bitterness, no regret. There was only the bright, expansive future stretching out before us. I had heard through the grapevine that Sarah had moved to another city. She had started dating someone new, but it hadn't worked out. I felt a distant sadness for her, but it was like hearing a story about a character in a book I'd read long ago. It had no power over me. My heart was full, and it belonged entirely to the woman standing in front of me, promising to be my partner for life. Married life with Chloe was a new kind of adventure. We traveled, we laughed, we built a home together. We supported each other's dreams. She started her own design studio, and I was her biggest cheerleader. My business continued to thrive, but it was no longer my entire identity. I had balance. We decided to start a family. The day Chloe told me she was pregnant was one of the happiest of my life. I was going to be a father. I thought about the child I would have, and I vowed to teach them the lessons I had learned, that you are always stronger than you think, and that your greatest setbacks can become your greatest strengths. I was no longer the man who was defined by a car accident or a failed marriage. I was a husband, a soon-to-be father, a businessman, a philanthropist. I was whole. The day my son Leo was born, I held him in my arms and wept. He was perfect. As I looked down at his tiny, sleeping face, I thought about the long, painful road that had led me to this moment. Every struggle, every tear, every moment of doubt had been worth it. They had all brought me here to this overwhelming, perfect love. Chloe was exhausted but radiant. "He looks like you," she whispered. In that moment, I forgave everything. I forgave the driver who hit me. I forgave Sarah for her weakness. I even forgave my own body for failing me. Because all of it was necessary. All of it was part of the story that gave me this. My son. My family. My purpose was now to protect this tiny, perfect human and to show him how to live a life of courage and kindness. Life with a newborn was chaotic and wonderful. I was changing diapers at 3 a.m. between checking Asian market openings. I was a different man, a better man. The driven, somewhat obsessive businessman had softened, learning to prioritize cuddle time over chart time. One afternoon, I was pushing Leo in his stroller through the park. The sun was warm and he was babbling happily. Pushing Leo in his stroller through the park. The sun was warm and he was babbling happily. I saw a woman sitting on a bench watching us. It was Sarah. She looked thin and sad. Our eyes met for a brief second. I saw a complex wave of emotions cross her face. Regret, longing, sorrow. I didn't stop. I didn't acknowledge her. I simply gave a small, neutral nod and kept walking, pushing my son toward his bright future. There was no room for her in my story anymore. She was a footnote, a lesson learned. My present was too beautiful to be tainted by the past. I continued to run my foundation, and it grew beyond my wildest dreams. We were funding groundbreaking research and changing lives. Anna left her job at the rehab center to run it full-time. We had become a powerful force for good. At a foundation event, a reporter asked me, "What's the secret to your success? Is it your investment strategy?" I smiled. "The secret," I said, "isn't a financial strategy. It's a life strategy. It's about choosing to get back up every time you get knocked down. It's about believing that your lowest point is not your final destination. The money is just a byproduct of that mindset." It was the truth. The wealth was nice, but it was meaningless compared to the richness of my life. I had love, family, health, and purpose. I was grateful for every single day, even the hard ones. On Leo's first birthday, we had a party in our backyard. It was filled with laughter, friends, and family. Ben was there, pretending to be a grumpy old man but secretly loving the chaos. Anna was there, making everyone do silly dances. Chloe's family was there. It was loud, messy, and perfect. I looked around at the scene, my son smashing cake into his hair, my wife laughing with her friends, the people I loved most in the world gathered together. My heart was so full it felt like it might burst. The accident felt like a lifetime ago. Sarah felt like a character from a story I'd once read. The pain was a distant memory, a fossil preserved in the bedrock of who I had become. It was a part of me, but it no longer defined me. My wife left me after my accident. She saw a broken man and a hopeless future. She was wrong on both counts. The broken man healed, stronger than before. The hopeless future became brighter than I ever imagined. 2 years later, I was healthier, wealthier, and infinitely happier. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. I had found a love that was built on respect, not need. I had a family that was my whole world. I had a career that was fulfilling and a mission that gave back. The journey was hard. There were days I wanted to give up. But I learned that rock bottom can be the best foundation to build a new life. I didn't just rebuild the old one. I created something entirely new and better. Sarah's rejection wasn't the end of my story. It was the brutal, necessary beginning. And for that, in a strange way, I will always be thankful.
If you enjoyed this story of epic revenge, do me a huge favor. Smash that like button, and make sure to subscribe for more tales of calculated justice, revenge, or karma, and let me know in the comments what you think about this story. Click the arrow button to watch more interesting stories. Please note, your support helps keep the lights on and the stories coming. Thank you.